Hey, Paul Thurrott here. We're at AvePoint's Shift Happens conference in Washington, D.C. with Tony Redmond, an IT consultant and a Microsoft MVP, a Petri contributor, and the primary author of Office 365 for IT pros. Good morning.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, good morning.
How you doing? So we're here to obviously talk about Office 365 and what's happening there. Do you want to talk about your book a little bit? We didn't discuss this ahead of time, but you have an amazing resource for Office 365 users.
Thank you. Well, Office 365 for IT pros, it's a book that is updated monthly to reflect what happens in the cloud. As we know, Office 365 is changing all the time, and we just felt that the traditional publishing model didn't work. You know, you just didn't have the time to do traditional copy editing, tech editing, and stuff like that.
Right.
So we publish a new version every year, and then we publish updates for that version as the year goes by. We're just finishing up the 2019 edition. We had 15 updates for it, 164 major updates in those updates, and we'll publish the 2020 edition on July 1.
A coincident with Microsoft's fiscal year.
Yeah, Microsoft's fiscal year, and the new car year as well,
Yeah,
which
that's
is more important, really.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations. Where can people find the book?
Office365, itpros.com.
Nice. Okay. So looking at Office 365, from my perspective, I've been covering Microsoft for a long time, like yourself. It's really interesting to see how Office has evolved into Office 365. And what I see today is just incredible momentum for teams. I mean, how do you qualify that? Because Microsoft doesn't really provide all the numbers we need.
Well, Microsoft never provides all the numbers.
That's right.
That's the first thing. So all you can really do is take what data they give you from time to time and try and put relationships between those numbers. So the last set of numbers, they said, there's 500,000 organizations using Teams. There's 93% of the Fortune 100. There's 160 organizations that have got more than 10,000 users using Teams. That's an important one, because that means to me that organizations have moved from the point of view of kicking the tires to real deployments. You do not have a deployment of 10,000 users unless you're fully committed.
Right.
And then you have the largest organization using Teams, which is Accenture. They're over 200,000 users. So these are big numbers. These are big numbers. And in the context of Office 365, where there's 180 million active users, you can see that Teams has got it's got enough room to grow. Really.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, they don't tell you how many Teams has right now, but could be anywhere between 35 and 50 million. Just taking 500,000 organizations and saying maybe 100 on average, that's 50 million.
So what was the monthly growth rate on Office 365 is?
It's about 3.5 million seats, and it has been for the last 24 months.
Some percentage of those would be on Teams as well, and that's the growth rate. That's incredible.
It is incredible. For an application that is still very new.
Still very right, and the most popular Microsoft Office application since
ever.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, right? And it's brand new.
Yeah, it's brand new, and the thing about Teams is that it is an application that is evolving at a huge rate of speed. I mean, every week you turn around. We talked about the book and changing it, but Teams is one of the things that we have to change for most often, because every week there's a new feature.
Right.
Every week there's a new insight, and you can criticize Teams from some, its management at times. You can criticize it. It can be slow. It can be very affected by network, but by gosh, this is an application that's growing at leaps and bounds. Its functionality is incredible for a relatively new application, and it's a great reason to use Office 365.
Right. I mean, as you know, you came up through the Exchange world. Most IT pros, most people, most knowledge workers or business workers look at Outlook as the center of their life. That's been the traditional view, and it's persisted today. But I was speaking with Microsoft, specifically someone from Microsoft 365 a few months ago, and I kind of offered up this notion: is it possible that Teams evolves into that role? Do you see Teams almost supplanting Outlook at some point?
So I've spoken about this at a couple of conferences where I said, if you look at Outlook as it was designed in 1996-97, remember that a long time ago?
Yeah.
Outlook very much represented a view of what an information worker did at that point in time. They lived in their mailbox,
Right.
they managed their calendar, they managed their contacts, there was journaling, all that sort of good stuff. If you look at Teams today, you could say, you can put it forward a case and say, Teams represents the way people work today.
It's a little different.
It's a little different because there's so much more video,
Right.
there's so much more audio, and the kind of messaging that people do, the personal chats and even the channel conversations, they tend to be shorter. The English used in the messages is different.
It's less formal, for sure.
Definitely less formal. And then there's all these things like likes and mentions and stuff like that that just didn't exist in Outlook.
That's right.
But they're all artifacts that have come in from messaging applications like Messenger, like WhatsApp and stuff like that. So yeah, you can put forward a case and say Teams it's not the new Outlook.
Right.
But it's filling a role that Outlook tried to fill in 1996-97.
Yeah. I think that's sort of where I was heading. I mean, it's obviously not designed to do what Outlook does, but it, in some way, seems to be evolving into the same role, even though what it does is different.
Insofar as Outlook was the communications hub for somebody internally.
Right.
Okay, yes, absolutely, I'll agree with you there. Where Teams falls down is that it doesn't do external communications.
Now, Microsoft's primary competitor is Slack. I mean, does Slack handle? No. So this is an area that needs to be.
I think
fixed,
Microsoft would have an incredible product if they just integrated something like Outlook Web App directly into Teams.
Almost into a panel or something on the side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just make it a channel tab or whatever, or just make it an app. Like they've got an app bar down the left-hand side. They just put OWA in there.
Right. That would make it the literal replacement at that point.
That could make it a literal replacement for Outlook for many people. But then, of course, there are other things. You're never going to replace an application that's been around for 20 years just like that.
No. It's a
integration
thing.
into a navigation bar is not, it's only the beginning.
Right.
So, for example, offline working. Outlook is phenomenal at offline working.
Sure.
Teams is not. For example, protection of email, encryption, all of that kind of advanced stuff. That's not there in Teams today. So there's a lot of work, but what it would do is it would allow people to do more work inside Teams, which is what I think would be a good thing.
Yeah. I think I see it evolving in that way. It seems.
I think so too.
The natural approach.
Remember, it is an application that's only been out there for a couple of years. We're judging it against an application that's been out there for 22 years.
For sure.
So, like us, it'll get older and wiser, maybe.
Speaking of getting older, back in the day when cloud computing was still a very new concept, and it was a lot of pushback from IT, especially people nervous about losing their job as an exchange administrator, perhaps whatever. We looked at email as kind of the low-hanging fruit at that point, but I've spoken to Microsoft since, and they said, it's funny, in retrospect, it seems like storage is the low-hanging fruit when it comes to cloud computing. Do you see that as being the case?
I think that's just a reflection of where we're at in the business. There's no doubt that email was the low-hanging fruit in terms of early migrations to Office 365. So when you look at the 180 million active users for Office 365, how much of that work came over from Exchange on-premises? You got to say a large percentage, a very, very large percentage.
Sure.
And even today, the largest single workload running in the cloud is Exchange Online.
Oh, well. Okay.
Right? But what's really happening now is that you are seeing people getting off their old file servers, their old SharePoint servers, their old network shares. These are all going into the cloud. And also another thing is that as people have seen, Office 365 has been out there now since June 2011.
Right.
It's been it's a long time.
Yeah.
And think about it. Of the major outages that you've seen, there's been a few. There's always going to be a few.
Sure.
But there's not all that many. So people have actually accumulated a great deal of confidence that the cloud is going to be up there.
I think that experience is so important because there's a lot of fears of the unknown, but once you see something in action over a period of time, you have a better understanding of how it's going to work.
And a big factor, I think, in this, in terms of files, has been the maturity of OneDrive.
Yeah.
Okay, because OneDrive a couple of years ago was was insert your favorite 3-letter words or 4-letter words here. It wasn't really very good because it was
robust. Wasn't robust. Is that the word you were looking
That's
for?
a 6-letter word, but we'll go on. It wasn't. Let's say it just wasn't very good.
Yes.
But the latest OneDrive clients, be they OneDrive for Business, OneDrive Consumer, are are very robust
Yes,
and
they are.
very reliable. So people can say, yeah, I can go in confidence, I can put my files into the cloud, I'm going to have access to them because I can synchronize them back to the PC. It's all good.
Right.
And the upshot then is, of course, then that when you look at PC configurations today and you look at the size of disks,
Right.
you sometimes wonder why people have these massive 1 terabyte disks in laptops. You just don't need them anymore.
I don't. I certainly don't. And I'm sort of a typical, information worker or whatever. I mean,
Right. Everything's in the cloud, so you
Yeah.
need enough for the OS, enough for temporary
That's right.
working, and that's it.
So do you see, obviously as people move to the cloud, especially for storage, they have existing on-prem solutions. Cloud is a great way to expand, and so they're going to maintain this what is essentially a hybrid environment. I mean, is this...
No, I think think it's much more of a switchover.
Yeah, an actual for storage. An
Yeah,
actual
yeah,
switchover.
yeah. Because if you let's look at it like this way. You think about all those Windows servers that are running as file servers.
Right.
They're probably old.
Yeah, that's true.
That's probably old.
Yep.
So, do you want to go through the fuss and bother of upgrading Windows and then replacing the hardware and doing all the management when you've got stuff in the cloud? The answer is probably not. You're going to get stuff across. Where hybrid works is where people want to keep specific elements of work on premises, like executive mailboxes, because they're just not confident enough about it. And in fact, hybrid is one of the big weapons that Microsoft has got for Office 365 over its opposition.
Oh, for sure.
It's phenomenal. Hybrid SharePoint less so, because I see in SharePoint it's just moving over. It's getting there because SharePoint in the cloud is so much easier to manage, so much easier to use. Why anybody would have hybrid SharePoint is a little bit beyond me. But then again, I'm not a SharePoint person.
Well, that's good for you. SharePoint can be a hairy mess, but
it can be a hairy mess.
I know that one of the initial complaints about SharePoint in the cloud was that it lacks some of the extensibility functionality they had on-prem. But
it does, but that's the nature of the cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that the old story that's trotted out is that when you buy electricity from a utility provider, you don't get to choose.
That's right.
What type of electricity
That's
you're going to use. Same type of thing. You move over to the cloud, sure, you're going to lose some extensibility. But to be fair to Microsoft, they are building a new generation of extensibility tools in the Power Platform. So you're seeing things like Flow, Power Apps, all of that sort of stuff coming there. And that's the replacement. That's where people should be focused
This is a lot like the Teams Outlook conversation in a way, because there is something coming that replaces it. It's not the exact same thing.
It's not, and will not be.
And it will, and it won't be. So as far as hybrid goes, though, we see, you can tell it's a big deal without having to know a lot about the industry, because all of a sudden, Google and Amazon and others are starting to talk about it. And these are companies that don't really have a strong hybrid play, but they're obviously hearing from their customers, regulatory needs, whatever the reason might be, that they have to have some kind of a hybrid approach.
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has been in the hybrid business from day one.
That's right.
It's been a huge and fundamental part of their success with Office 365. What I find it interesting now is that we look at the kind of reports that are coming in of wins and losses. You don't see the kind of thing. You don't see Gmail, you don't see G Suite winning against Office 365 too many times the way you used to. And I think the reason why is because people firstly have more confidence in the cloud. Secondly, they've got hybrid. Thirdly, they've got some of these new applications like Planner and Teams that they can use. So there's more reason. I mean, if you do a functionality bake-off between G Suite and Office 365, there's only one winner. Especially when you've got more of the administration stuff like PowerShell, like the Graph API, like advanced encryption and so forth and so on. There's only one winner.
Just the sheer migration capabilities you get on the Microsoft side. I don't understand. I suppose for smaller installs, I mean, obviously Google's had a few big ones, but it just seems like such a natural transition for corporations to make of all sizes.
If they've been using Office in particular, there's only one place to go.
They have been.
Which they have been. I mean, you know the figures for Office and the number. It's over $1 billion. It's over $1 billion. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of growth there.
To go.
That's right. And they'll get that at the low end. One of the things that people get confused about is, and Microsoft does a great job of confusing people, is the number of Office 365 products.
That's right.
business, premium,
Sure. Oh, you got
enterprise,
to add Microsoft
education,
365
whatever.
into that too. I mean, it's essentially superset SKUs of the Office 365 stuff.
And the interesting thing there, a really interesting thing there I found is that in the last set of results that Microsoft released, they said now over 100 million users are now using enterprise mobility and security.
That's right.
Which tells me
That, yeah.
that their bundling is working.
I love that you picked that out because I picked that up on their last earnings as well, because they never really supply Microsoft 365 metrics. That was one of the first ones ever.
That was, yeah.
And that hints, I think, at the extent of Microsoft 365, the success of it.
Right, because the previous data point that we had was Scott Guthrie, when we spoke at an Ignite keynote a number of years ago. He said that just about half of the Office 365 enterprise customers who were using EMS at that point in time.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you start put that 100 million number into context of 180 million Office 365.
That's over 50.
That's over 50. But when you think about a lot of Office 365 is small shops.
Yeah.
So if you take the enterprise segment out of that, maybe 120 million. Now you're getting to a point where,
Yeah.
they're really doing very well penetrating.
I obviously are, because I think a lot of people who are companies that adopt Microsoft 365 are maybe doing it because at some point we might want to look at the management capabilities, EMS stuff.
Yep.
We're gonna position ourselves for that future. The fact that they actually have that many companies using it is astonishing to me, and I think that suggests the success of Microsoft 365.
And to be fair, if you do buy into EMS, you get so much extra functionality that is important to the enterprise, especially in Azure Active Directory management.
Right.
The management features that are built into those premium plans make EMS a really nice thing to buy.
Yep, I totally agree.
Yep.
Well, I think that's all I have for you today.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Again, we're at AvePoint's Shift Happens conference in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.